So it's more me who has the pleasure of being on this panel and talking to this amazing audience of the BPESA and this esteemed panel. I am excited to share some of the work that we're doing at Everest Group on this topic, and really more to learn about what we're doing here in what is actually happening on the ground in South Africa through the colleagues that are on this panel. So we'll go ahead and get quickly into my little presentation. So we are currently in the midst of running a state of the market study of impact sourcing. It's an update to what Everest Group did in 2014. And that was in partnership with Rockefeller Foundation. But what we've really seen since then is a big uptick in impact sourcing. We just heard the phrase mentioned a couple of times in the last session. And so we thought it was really important to do an update to this market. Just for the audience that may not know who we are at Everest Group, I thought it might be helpful to just say we are focused on research and with an intent to be a trusted source. But in many ways, my role at Everest Group is to be more influential and advocate for these practices. So I just thought it would be helpful to see who it is that we are. So I'm going to zoom through the next couple of slides, just a snapshot of Everest at a glance, the kind of analysis that we do, the types of folks that are with us. Sorry, there's a little animation in that one. And this is just a smattering of giving you an idea of what kinds of reports we put out there. So getting to the subject on hand, which is the next slide, defining impact sourcing and defining what the scope is of our study. The basic definition of impact sourcing is a business practice where one is intentionally hiring from marginalized communities, and how that's defined, how those specifics get defined. I think different organizations have put some parameters around that. The Global Impact Sourcing Coalition came up with the standard. We're more moving to the direction of saying, you service provider, please define what it is that you need, because we believe that the benefits of impact sourcing can be felt in various ways. Our state of the market study is focusing in on specialists, companies where the primary talent strategy is impact sourcing, so that we can really tease out the good practices that are making this a successful business, and really gaining the 4 pillars of what we've indicated are the benefits of impact sourcing. And I feel like I'm preaching to the audience here when I put these 4 benefits out there, so I'm not even going to read through them, but just to say that we know there's a business benefit to doing impact sourcing. It's not just a feel-good activity, and that's why we're here today. The next slide, I just wanted to go into a few more details, and if you want to just go ahead and click through and we'll bring it all up on why it is that Everest Group is focusing in on impact sourcing. First of all, we do have a history which does begin in South Africa, and we're excited to kind of revisit because of that long history. We also have a team that's passionate about it. I'm lucky enough to have impact sourcing in my designation, but really a lot of the reason that I was brought in is because of the interest of our team and the background that we have started to build on various talent models in terms of what's happening globally, what's happening with gig economies, non-traditional backgrounds. So in the suite of topics that we cover, human talent, which is the core of this business, has really become a trademark of something that we've focused in on. And lastly, I think I mentioned it right at the start. We want to play a more advocacy role for this talent model. And whether it's a pure play impact sourcing talent model or it's integrated into programs, not only do we see that clients are asking for this, enterprises are asking for this within their larger DEI diversity and equity and inclusion programs and their supplier diversity programs, but they're asking for it because it makes business sense. So that's why we're doing this. And now I just wanted to get into, we're still collecting data, we're still analyzing that data, but I wanted to get into a little snapshot of what the study is telling us so far, what the research is telling us so far. So as I mentioned, the focus of the research is on specialists. And I think we're going to circulate this deck after the fact. So even if we're not, I would love for folks to get in touch with me if they haven't heard from us and they consider themselves a specialist. There's a specific RFI that's linked here. We are also talking to large service providers like EXL and WebHelp that mentioned impact sourcing in their presentation. So we have a study, a survey that we would like to have contributions towards that. A lot of the panelists today are what I'm calling the ecosystem builders for impact sourcing, and that assessment, sort of our point of view on what's happening there, will come soon. And please do stay tuned and stay participative in that process. So some of our early findings so far is, and this is very much in comparison to what we learned back in 2014, yes. First of all, the spread, the geographic spread of impact sourcing, it's not as though marginalized communities suddenly erupted in all these countries. It's more that there's been an acceptance and a visibility to those marginalized communities and bringing them into the purview of this industry. So we have already more than 20 countries that are represented, and they're spanning both the global north and the south. So that's what's been really interesting. I think the studies that have been done in the past have really honed in on the developing world, and now we're seeing that expansion. I think the other thing that we've started to see is that the services that are being offered are beginning to expand and diversify. As one would imagine, the largest areas continue to be BPS voice and non-voice, but we're seeing a lot more digital services being added to that. And we're even seeing smatterings of ITS infrastructure, ITS applications, folks building bots. So I think that's also a very interesting and exciting trend for this work, and might even influence the work of some of our friends that are on the panel. Finally, some of these specialists are really designed to be on-ramps into future careers. And the good news is that we are seeing that the on-ramp into the future careers of BPO, ITO, GBSs is as we would have hoped for it to be. I think that there's some interesting stories out there on that, and those are sort of some of the exciting things that we want to get more into. And the good news, at least on the specialist side, we are still waiting on the surveys of the larger providers, but on the specialist side, we are seeing majority women, 55% at this point, showing up as women. So I think these are very preliminary, still doing a lot more data analysis, and I'm even hoping that from this conversation we'll get more companies interested in participating in the study, but this is at least a snapshot. I just wanted to share, and these are, again, two more very quick slides of, we have some related content that is both on our website and getting developed, just to show this is an area, ESG, more generally, sustainability and ESG are things that we are focused on and want to do a lot more from. So I think my last slide is just a contacts sheet. So I'd love to move into more of the panel discussion here and say, again, I feel very honored to be working on a panel of such esteemed guests. The first person who's going to be speaking with us is Sharmi, and Sharmi is with Harambe, which I'm very excited to hear from the ecosystem that's been created through Harambe, and I would say the global movement that's really been started through this company is just very exciting, and looking forward to hearing more about that. She's also going to share with us the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative, which I'm excited to hear about, and also bring an Africa-wide perspective, I hope. Sharmi, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rita. Firstly, I'm so honored to, be part of this discussion. Greetings from Kigali in Rwanda. I am technically based in Nairobi, but travel often to both Rwanda and South Africa. And I'm excited to share Harambe's systems change story, of which the BPESA and the Global Business Services partnership is core. And then also I'll share a little bit about how we power the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention as well. So a little bit about Harambe in context. Who is Harambe? Some of you may have heard some of my colleagues present earlier, etc. We're a youth employment accelerator focusing very much in South Africa with a presence in Rwanda, where I am calling in from today. And we started out in 2011, very much trying to address the biggest youth unemployment challenge, I think, in the world. South Africa's youth unemployment challenge is well known to everyone on this call. It's upwards of 60% if you count discouraged work seekers. And of every 1 million young people coming into the labor market a year, 2/3 become NEETs, so not in education, employment, and training. So they fall out of the labor market entirely. We have 9 million NEETs in South Africa today. To give you context, that's the size of the country of Austria, just in terms of population. So that's a huge problem. But it isn't just a supply side problem, right? So I think what we discovered early on, our first evolution, the first development of Harambe when it was established under the Yellowwoods investment company, we saw that millions of young people were entering the labor market, but there were also high vacancies. And Yellowwoods is an investment holding company that also invests in companies such as Hollard, Nando's, for those of you who are chicken lovers, and Peri Peri sauce. And they were struggling to find entry-level talent. So we asked ourselves the question, how do so many people with vacancies still struggle to find talent in a country with such high unemployment? And in the early years, we discovered it wasn't just about this supply-demand mismatch. It was that young people had talent and capability, and employers just didn't know where to find them. So we broke down job descriptions. We said, how can you reduce barriers to entry? I think some of what Andy's described and previous speakers have talked about, how do you actually break down barriers to entry to some of these entry-level jobs, which are dignified, great jobs for young people? And the first, I would say, 10 years was very much about reducing barriers to employment and to looking at, getting young people into the labor market with partners in the global business services sector, especially. So the first 10 years, you can see this, hopefully you can see it on your screen. This is a picture of a football stadium. You can see the vuvuzelas. Some of you have said you've been to South Africa or missed South Africa. Vuvuzelas were central to 2010. This is a picture of a soccer stadium with young people outside trying to look in, but there were barriers erected. Barriers such as transport, barriers such as qualifications. They didn't have the skill signals that could tell the labor market what they could do. Barriers such as data costs. So our first 10 years were about figuring out what those barriers are, working with employers, and then addressing to break those barriers to get young people into work with more inclusive competency assessments, and also advocating with employers to say, drop degree qualification requirements or work experience requirements for entry-level jobs. So in the first 10 years, we've celebrated 10 years this April. We have now a network of 2.2 million young work seekers and have enabled over 500,000 pathways to work. Central to that story has been our partnership with the global business services sector, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But what's exciting about our next 10 years, we're not sort of sitting now just on our scale story, is that we're moving from the question of what do we do as Harambe to what needs to be done at an ecosystem level. And it's now moving our story from scale to systems change. And this is a bit more tricky. Systems change is an often used word. It's something that we're still grappling with. But it's about removing systemic barriers for all. So changing the qualifications framework, for example, to allow for micro-credentials to be adopted, such that more young people can enter the workforce. Or looking at job creation, not just in the global business services sector, but other high-growth sectors like digital or installation, repair, and maintenance. So our goal this next 10 years is ambitious, to remove systemic barriers for all. But we do believe what's exciting is that we can create a prototype, an African prototype for a global challenge. We've decided to focus on 4 key systems, and this is a little bit abstract, so forgive me, but really 4 key systems. And if you look at the blue, green, and yellow, the formal economy will continue to power South Africa's engine and of growth, but it will absorb a shrinking majority of young people over the next 5 years, unfortunately. So while it is critical, it will shrink and reduce in terms of the number of jobs generated. And I think many of the colleagues in this panel and discussion are aware of that. So we increasingly have to also look at other spaces, such as micro-enterprise, gig workers, and government stipended programs, to almost think of a whole economy view to say jobs generated actually have a trickle impact across all sectors of the economy. But a central engine that powers these 3 other pieces is what we call pathway management. The pathway management is sort of these red arrows designed to sort of indicate mobility and acceleration, is the concept of both inclusive job creation, reducing barriers, and critically linking young people to work at scale. So as I mentioned, we've enabled over 500,000 pathways. That's over several millions of data points of inclusive date matches of young people to work. So we can say what has actually worked in connecting a young person to a job. How does this data translate in terms of a young person's employment journey over time? Are they able to gain stable employment pathways over time and remain in the labor market? I mentioned that a key aspect is the formal economy. Here's where I'll talk specifically about the example of our partnership with the global business services sector. So we found out early on we cannot do this alone. We were birthed by Yellowwoods, an investment holding company with private sector influence. We partnered early on with the government, but critically, we discovered that we needed a model, a sector-based model to grow jobs inclusively. And I think the best example of this is the BPESA DTIC relationship, where we partnered with BPESA as well as the Department of Trade and Industry to say, hey, there's job growth opportunity here. There's a lot of investment potential, but it's not just about that. It's getting the right people in the room, convening the stakeholders, assembling a really credible team. Many of the people in this panel in this room are part of that. Develop an intermediary, BPESA being that key one, and execute to iterate to build momentum. A key aspect of that is designing incentives for foreign investors to come in and grow jobs, and having as part of those incentives inclusive job growth. So can you have tax incentives for jobs that are specifically for youth, specifically for women, specifically for people from disadvantaged backgrounds? And this worked. And what we're really excited to see, a really summary snapshot of pretty much everything that's familiar to this room, several billions of rand in terms of value created, close to over 50,000 jobs now, new jobs being created in this space. And these are really high quality, dignified jobs in the South African labor market in particular. You know, last year, South Africa was designated the #1 global business offshore destination in the world. I'm excited to say from Rwanda, the influence of BPESA in South Africa has actually spilled over to Rwanda. So Rwanda actually was also named on the map as an up-and-coming destination in Africa for customer service as well. So in summary, I think Harambe's approach to convening and building a coalition and a systems level intervention to addressing job creation has been hugely partly due to partnerships, and I think has been influential at a systems level because of that. Last 2 things to mention here. We're taking systems level to the next level here. We're influencing national skills policies. So for example, Harambe's experiment with a pay-for-performance social impact bond has actually been now adopted by the National Skills Federation in South Africa, where they're thinking of looking at pay-for-performance as a mechanism to deliver skilling, which is now a systems-wide then approach to say, don't just pay for training, pay for placement. And that's quite exciting to see. And BPESA is helping drive that quite critically. So I'm just going to maybe pause there, just go to the last slide, just a summary of our impact to date as Harambe. Over 500,000 young people linked to jobs and skilling, a key piece of that being global business services jobs, a huge network of over 2 million. We've injected about 12 billion rand in terms of income that young people have generated that they've told us that they've earned during the course of their partnership with us. And we interact with young people on a daily basis with a contact center that actually powers our entire offering as well. So I'm excited to also say that, you know, this has impacted Rwanda. I just had the privilege of visiting a contact center site today where there's a 50-seat contact center that's just being established with potential for thousands more jobs in Rwanda as well. So I think the work in South Africa is actually having an Africa-wide impact. So with that, I'm going to just stop for questions and over back to you. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Sharmi. We definitely have to connect offline about Rwanda and who's doing what there. This is very exciting. And thank you so much for the amazing work that you're doing across the country. Next, we have Franco, who is the co-founder of Shadow Careers. First of all, I love the name, and I love the concept of shadow ships. So really looking forward to hearing more about the skilling journey and what you're doing to further the impact sourcing work in South Africa. Over to you, Franco.
Thank you, Rita. I'm honored and excited to be participating in tonight's discussion, and especially with this esteemed panel. So let me tell you a little bit about Shadow. Was founded by a team of like-hearted humans who came together to make a real difference. We're all passionate about creating careers for our amazing youth. Our focus is on impact sourcing, and we predominantly focus on excluded, never been employed before youth, who in ordinary circumstances would find it really, really difficult to find permanent employment. The Shadow team have extensive experience in the GBS sector, and we're assisting in providing this rapidly evolving industry with an empowered new talent source. This means that we team up with like-hearted GBS partners who advise us of their demand, and that way we recruit into the program only the number of students that we can place into careers, thereby helping to secure them actual employment. Our students are taken through a 3-month career-specific course, which makes them ready for the actual role they go into. And the program is currently achieving a 97% success rate. This means that 97% of the students who come through the Shadow program go into permanent careers. So by creating the careers, we're not only changing the lives of our students, but the lives of their families, their communities, and in time, our beautiful country, South Africa. We are reliant on funding for the program, and we were initially supported by some wonderful private sector partners. But this year, we have been truly privileged to have worked with Harambee on pilot programs. As we heard from Sharmi, Harambee do such great work and are genuinely a like-hearted partner. We cannot thank thank them enough for entrusting us with the pilot, as this would not have been possible without their assistance. Earlier today, we had a graduation ceremony for our last 2 classes of 2021. In the next few days, these 40 young Shadow graduates will start their careers with 2 international GBS partners. That's Sigma South Africa and EXL. This means by the end of this month, we would have placed 120 young people into permanent careers in just over 16 months. I'd like to now share a short video that was taken at today's graduation ceremony.
Okay, so this appreciation certificate goes out to the Shadow Careers family. It reads as, while we are excited about the opportunity that awaits us in the future, it is with sadness that we say goodbye. Our time here has been marked by both challenges and triumphs, and we will cherish the many friendships we have made along the way. We will always be grateful for the opportunity that Shadow Careers has given us. Your guidance and support have been instrumental in helping us achieve our professional goals. We want to thank each and everyone that is involved in this company from the bottom of our hearts, helping it grow, going the extra mile, sacrificing your time to help communities like ours. There are few people that do things that you guys do. Thank you for your generosity, your kindness, your thoughtfulness, your humility, your humbleness, your caring nature. We do not know you guys personally, but if you did not possess all the things that we have just mentioned, then we would not be here. We cherish and appreciate the opportunity that you have given us, not just us, but many other young people out there. Keep doing what you're doing because you are changing lives. We promise that we will maintain the performance throughout our careers in this new venture that we are embarking on.
Truly, truly touching, and it catches us every single time. Really heartfelt and completely unexpected from our students, but it really makes what we're doing so worthwhile. Whilst we do everything that we can to empower and prepare these young humans for their new careers, our job is only half done. The other crucial part is played by our incredible GBS partners. Their attitude and approach to receiving these new colleagues makes all the difference to their success. Being equipped to support and encourage in the first few months is vital. Really receiving them into their environment. And this investment in doing this creates significant benefits, not only for the young shadow, but for the company itself. To talk more about the success of the initiative, I'd like to hand over to our first partner, Sigma South Africa. They've been an exceptional partner to our business and to many young shadows who have gone on to flourish in their business. Thank you to their approach, the transition is almost seamless and our young shadows are integrated and supported in the best possible way. This, of course, is testament to the leadership of the business, with a full buy-in from C-suite down. They're a great example of how this can really work, where these kind of programs, these initiatives, and with the GBS sector aligning together, we can make significant success and build towards what we've heard in the last 2 days in the conference, the growth that we need to take South Africa to those numbers of 500,000+ people in the GBS sector. I would like to introduce to you the Managing Director of Sigma South Africa, David Neale, to talk to you about their experience.
Hi, Franco. Thank you, everyone, for the invitation once more. You can see from behind me, although I have an English accent, I'm actually in sunny Cape Town, South Africa. So hello to everyone on the call. Just to share a very small part of who Sigma is. Sigma is a BPO that's based in the UK, in South Africa and Australia. South Africa, Cape Town is probably our largest presence and where we see the urgent need, I guess, for programs such as Shadow Careers and what Franco has described there. The partnership has been in place for the last 15 months. And as that partnership has grown, so has the integration. So we are not, I guess, a partner where we shake hands. We're a partner that holds hands as we progress and work through the model together. And it's been an absolutely incredible journey so far. There's been over 100 members that have joined us through the Shadow program. We've got another group tomorrow, so I hope on the video that's certainly some of the members that will be joining us, Franco, and we'll welcome them as we have with the others. It's probably fair to say that the work that the candidates undertake for us is relatively complex. So Sigma has a specialism in utilities, UK energy, companies and financial services. So more often than not, the speed to competency for anybody joining our business is anything up to 3 months. So the work that they undertake is very valuable, often dealing with themselves vulnerable customers that have energy or financial needs, and sensitivity is really, really important. It's been great to see the development of the journey and the performance. It surprised us to a certain extent that the performance metrics for people coming through the Shadow program outperformed all our traditional routes. So when we look at attrition, absence, key performance indicators for clients, that they're outperforming our standard recruitment routes, which we're delighted to see as our clients are. One of the main differences that we see in the performance that surprises, I guess, and also the clients to give them comfort, is one of the core KPIs that we measure across a number of clients is what most people are aware of is NPS or heartbeat or customer satisfaction. And more often than not, the Shadow candidates outperform most others in this area, which really gives comfort to the fact that they can endear and build business brands. You know, what often people worry about when they not only outsource, but when they undertake different recruitment routes, such as impact soaring, is what will that mean to their brand reputation? And on those key metrics, such as customer satisfaction, NPS and others, the Shadow Careers recruits are really showing the difference in that metric, which is great. In terms of their overarching performance, I'm pleased to say that one of the first ever recruits through the program became a top performer on one of our largest campaigns. There's over 400 people on that campaign. It's an energy campaign. It's a service complicated campaign, and they became a top performer after a short period of time. And Speaking with them yesterday, we had our global CEO arrive in Cape Town, and we had a roundtable with the Shadow guys. He was speaking of his ambitions to wanting to move into management, and he has a development plan in place to get there. So they don't see this as necessarily just the starting point. They see it as a journey as they continue to invest in themselves. Sigma's aim personally is to continue the partnership we have with Franco and Shadow Careers. We want this to be a continued method of our recruitment. We see all the value that we get from impact sourcing and a partnership such as this. As we look to integrate and invest further in the partnership, we get feedback from all of the candidates that pass through the program, and we've made many changes as we've progressed through the cohorts. I think we're on the 6th or 7th cohort now in terms of the work that we do with Shadow. And as we gain confidence and our clients gain confidence, we're looking to open that to a much larger recruitment pool. So the partnership is going really, really well. Clients and internal stakeholders couldn't be happier with the work that we've done. And obviously the benefit that it brings, which many of you have spoken about today. So from a personal endorsement point of view, firstly, thank you, Franco, for the introduction to Shadow in the first instance, and thank you to everybody else for hearing my personal testament, I guess, to the impact of impact sourcing within the Sigma business.
Thank you very much, Devin.
So sorry. I was too excited. That's what happens. Franco, thank you so much for sharing the video of the graduation ceremony. We were hoping to speak to some youth more in a live manner, but I think that's at least that at least gave us some inspiration. And then David, thank you so much for giving us the practitioner perspective. And it's also very inspiring to see that integration. Obviously, if the jobs didn't exist, there would be no point in doing this skilling. So that it's the full picture. It's very exciting. I have the pleasure of introducing Shaun next, who I think is also going to give us some of the practitioner perspective from Explore Data Science, and looking forward to hearing more about your work, David. Or sorry, Shaun, take it away.
Thanks, Rita. Firstly, I spent many years as a management consultant preparing and sharing PowerPoint slides, and I haven't got that today, so I feel completely naked, and hopefully this will be okay. I mean, I think for me to share the sort of story and the need and where the Explore Data Science Academy started, what we built, and then the results feels like a good spend of a couple of minutes. So where this started, right? I mean, I and a bunch of colleagues were actuaries in corporate South Africa, so actuaries, mathematicians and statisticians, building models that nobody really understands or cares for on Excel and sort of SQL databases is what we were doing 5-10 years ago. And back then, there was a massive demand for this thing called a data scientist and data engineer. And those words weren't that common back then, but we needed them in the companies we worked at. And we didn't need 10, we needed hundreds. And you sort of looked at all our colleagues, and we needed thousands of these skills across South Africa back then. When you went to look for them, there weren't any. There were like 5 or 10 coming out of a niche program at UCT that had a PhD sort of attached to it. And it just didn't make sense, right? We need tens of thousands across the country, and we're sort of producing 5 to 10 a year. And that gap was just an entrepreneur's dream, and B, just a societal sort of enterprise problem for the country that needed to be solved. So we then said, okay, well, let's quit our jobs and let's build this thing called the Explore Data Science Academy, which is going to produce these skills and the supply that we need to meet the demand to survive as a country, right? I mean, if we're not going to digitize and become data first, we're not going to survive type thing. So that was sort of the starting points. The natural competition, which I'll spend a second on, is the universities, right? So universities shouldn't present these skills. But as I said, I mean, big problems then and now. I mean, the university's curriculum are outdated. I mean, it takes 10 years for an idea to come to the classroom. And in the world of tech, like 10 years is 2 generations, and what you're teaching is redundant, right? So currently, a lot of the universities will teach, say, the high school example will teach Delphi, and Delphi is, was deprecated, a decade ago. So that was sort of problem one with universities, is teaching material that wasn't relevant in the world of tech. The second was, master's programs. So to get there, the filters and the the sort of the ability to get there was so few that it excluded 99.99% of the population. So we thought, okay, well, wait a minute, let's just turn this on this head. Let's build an institution that basically accepts anyone on aptitude. So we'll prepare some tests. They don't need an honors degree. They just need to sort of be smart, or sort of full to one. And then we're going to teach something that's current and relevant and taken from the field on a quarterly basis, right? So we're going to take AWS and Azure and what we're doing today, and we're going to sort of teach that tomorrow. So that was the big idea. We built this academy. It's a 1-year course. 6 months is in the classroom learning. When I say in the classroom, it's not in the classroom. You're in teams solving problems that are real world with practitioners supervising you. So it's sort of a work simulated environment. And you're doing that for 6 months, learning all this complicated stuff. And then the last 6 months are in our teams of our other business units, and you with teams solving problems for clients, right? So again, very different to a theoretical university, whiteboard, triple integral, like 3-hour essay writing, sort of solving problems, real world problems in teams using the latest tech. And that was the big idea, right? So that was 5 years ago, and everybody thought we were crazy. You need a degree. All the usual detractors were there. 4 years later, I'll share some of the results now. So we've taught, probably 2,000 students now. Currently, we're at about 2,000 a year. So the forward-looking cohorts are sort of doubling year on year. Of those students we accept, I'd say probably a third have only matrics, so sort of excluded, would never be allowed to study data science before, and probably a third sort of were doing degrees but dropped out for personal reasons, right? Like lack of funding or personal tragedy, etc. So probably 2/3 of our students going to the academy, would never ever have had access to this type of learning, given the current university system. And the results speak for themselves, right? So our placement rate is sort of 95%, which is, we think, quite impressive. And those students go on to high-paying jobs, often now remotely, that are life-changing, right? So, I think $40,000 is our annual starting salary, which for a graduate who's 19, who's got a matric from a disadvantaged background to sort of do this course and earn, $36,000 is a transformative to them, their families, and their communities. And to do that, hundreds, if not thousands of times feels like we're onto something. And that formula, which we think we've sort of got right and scalable, we're really sort of putting our foot down and scaling this across Africa now, because the talent in South Africa is massive, but in Africa it's multiples of that given the volume. So that's sort of the high level stats. I'll give you a sort of an explore example, which is we're quite proud of too. So we've got our own business units that solve problems for customers. We've got a utility, I heard utilities earlier. We've got a utility tech business, which builds AI solutions for utility companies. I think this case study was earlier today, so apologies if people have seen this, but that team is probably 110 explorers, all working from their garages in Joburg and Cape Town. The team went from 2 to 120 during COVID, right? So a team spun up virtually. I haven't seen them, the clients haven't seen them, working for Thames Water largely. And that team has just, knocked the leather off the ball. I mean, they've won data science provider for Thames in the medium term. We won data science project of the year on Wednesday nights in the IT Awards, which is the Emmys of sort of tech in the UK. Won productivity app of the year, like lots of awards, but fundamentally, talent largely marginalized from this academy that probably wouldn't have had access to this learning and these type of jobs going into our business unit, writing code from Cape Town at half the price into the UK and winning international awards. So that's my story, which was brief, but just to summarize it, right? I mean, what's been mind-blowing to someone like me who's an academic and had preconceived ideas of, 20 years study and a PhD before you can think about becoming a data science, really sort of questioning those assumptions, finding talents, often raw, disadvantaged, marginalized, and sort of places you wouldn't expect, really finding them, teaching them, empowering them, giving them these sort of lucrative sort of skills of the future that are in massive demand, and we need millions of them globally. And then really giving them the opportunities in Explore and outside of Explore to sort of do what they love and earn a lot of money and transform their lives, sort of building solutions that will change the world. That's us.
Oh my proud. I'm just beaming from all the inspiration from this panel so far. Shaun, I'm definitely going to be in touch about our study because you definitely need to be part of it. Amazing statistics, especially the fact that the starting salaries at the level that they're really, really very inspiring. Our final speaker is Clayton Williams from Cape BPO, the CEO of Cape BPO. And again, I think we're going to talk and get inspired about the way they're scaling talent and skilling and being able to attract businesses to South Africa. Clayton, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rita. And as my fellow panelists have said, what an honor and a privilege to be part of this conversation. So thank you very much for having me. I think firstly, Cape BPO is the strategic business partner of the City of Cape Town and the Western Cape government, responsible for the development of the BPO GBS sector in the Western Cape. And our activities are related to investor promotion, industry development, and obviously skills development. And I suppose when we kind of embrace the notion of impact sourcing, and I must, hats off to an organization like Harambee for, really trailblazing, if I can put it that way, this whole rhetoric related to impact sourcing, because it's definitely been embraced from a South African perspective. So when we looked at this strategically about 4 years ago, the first thing that we did was try to identify, the intent behind impact sourcing. And very quickly, we kind of established that it was related to inclusivity. And the problem statement that we developed or looked at related to inclusivity was, how do we create mechanisms to allow previously disadvantaged, marginalized youth access to gainful employment opportunities? And in unpacking that, I identified that it's about both the design and execution of supply chain practices. And those supply chain practices, from the pure sourcing side of things, could be related to candidate profiles. So movement away from those traditional, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, candidate profiles related to, you've got to have a grade 12 or a matric. You need 6 to 12 months of experience in a contact center environment, and really kind of changing and shifting the paradigm in terms of that, what their profile would look like in determining what key baseline competencies are relevant to the sector. And then also looking at, what are the sourcing mechanisms that could enable inclusivity? One such example is SA Youth. What are the mechanisms that we could, not necessarily because of varying degrees of different access points, so taking opportunities to the community. And then I think finally, what are the assessment criteria that we need to look at? So as opposed to testing against traditional mechanisms and traditional indicators, testing for aptitude or propensity for an individual of a certain profile to function successfully in a BPO GBS environment. So having said that, I think we developed certain principles which kind of informed the way forward. And that was developing accessible scalability beyond existing visible talent pools, digitally blended sourcing, hiring and learning options that were critically implemented were all related to that end in mind with, can any youth anywhere in South Africa access an opportunity, or is it just for those that have access to infrastructure-enabled opportunities? Another key component was related to community-based sourcing strategies, underpinned by kind of really intelligent, intuitive technology-led sourcing assessment and development of placement tools. And then identifying youth that could be fit for the role was a critical element to this process, ensuring that those targeted for impact sourcing initiatives were set up for success from the start of the programs that we deploy, which I'll get into shortly. And if there's any gaps that we identify, developing kind of bridging mechanisms that could close those gaps and mitigate any risks that when an individual embarks on a program, they would struggle. Our recruitment processes and hiring timeframes were revised to ensure that extended onboarding, orientation, and workforce support programs were implemented to create a supported landing into formal employment opportunities. And I think most importantly, during the hiring process, barriers to entry were identified and proactive strategies were put in place and designed to implement and facilitate easy access Examples being, numeracy levels, business communication, language, accent pronunciation, business acumen, professionalism. So all those components related to pre-employability and work readiness. So I think if we take kind of what was done at the sourcing stage of a learner's journey, we developed this notion that impact sourcing should be seen as an implicit principle or a deliberate intent, not as an initiative or a program. And I think what was really embraced by the broader ecosystem was that impact sourcing should not be seen in isolation related to, widening of the funnel. Because if we look at traditionally within South Africa and in the international outsourcing environment, based on data that's at our disposal, typically we would function on a CV to hire ratio of 20-1. So for every 20 CV screened, one individual was successful. And if you look at scale, that means for every 1,000 jobs needed, we need to kind of source and identify potential, 20,000 beneficiaries or previously disadvantaged youth. So having said that, I think our notion and our adoption of impact sourcing, it was around not just the sourcing part of it, as I've said, but the impact onboarding, impact learning and development, impact management of individuals and programs. And I think that almost kind of culminated in development of this notion of impact employment, which is kind of the end-to-end learner lifecycle. And, if I look at the nature of our programs that we've deployed, I think that the twofold, either skills programs focused on our strategic intent within our skills strategy, which is the development of resources and skilled practitioners in demand-led domain verticals. And as a result, we developed academies relative to those verticals. So where we saw demand agitation in utilities, retail, telco, we very, in an agile way, deployed academies that could kind of build those vertically specific skills. And then the other type of skills program is the full-on learnership, which is a kind of a 12-month, highly intense and administratively robust process. And I think irrespective of whether it was a skills program or a learnership, skills program is much shorter, that's kind of 3 to 6 months, or the full 12-month learnership, the foundation of those programs were exactly the same. That was predefined modules related to work readiness. So preparing a learner for kind of the world of work in our sector, especially within the international space. And secondly was the adoption of a behavioral support program, really focused on support from a psychosocial perspective for learners through the duration of that program. And we've definitely seen that, through those key mechanisms as foundational prerequisites, irrespective of what programs we were deploying, it was kind of creating a baseline enabler related to impact sourcing. And if I can just end with some figures, if I look back at the last 3 years or 4 years, actually, in combining skills programs and learnerships, we've successfully taken 3,000 beneficiaries through these programs with 100% placement rate, because all the programs are demand-led. Because we kind of an industry aggregator, we can understand the nature of demand and the kind of demand that is being anticipated in the 6 to 12-month process. But I think more importantly, and I suppose most impressively, with an 80% retention after 12 months of those learners within those organizations, which is far more impressive than I think if you look at an industry standard in a traditional kind of BPO, GBS operation. So I think all roads would lead to embracing, like I said, impact employment as an extension of impact sourcing.
Wow. Back to just being very inspired, Clayton. And I think I'd actually prepared a few questions for our Q&A, which I'm afraid I don't know if we actually have time for to the organizers. I hope we can at least bring everyone back on camera and show our esteemed panel. But I did have a couple of questions that I wanted to bring to our panel. And if no time, at least they're telling me no time. I'm going to leave you with these thoughts, these pieces of these nuggets and ideas that I hope we can answer. First, I think maybe the biggest question is for the industry, how do we move the impact sourcing conversation from a nice to do and the right thing to do to a great thing to do. We heard just now about the kinds of performance that's coming out of the impact workers. We've heard about retention, which is a huge issue, not just during the Great Resignation, but even before. So I think that's a really important problem. And my question is it a branding problem or is it an actual delivery problem? I think it's branding from what I just heard, but how to change that, I'm not sure. I mean, I noted that during the earlier presentations, Capita didn't use the term impact sourcing, and Ascensos is now starting to, I believe. I don't think it was mentioned in the presentation, but that's first question. The second question is that we did hear the term used by providers like EXL and WebHelp, that it's an important part of their strategy. I think the big question in my mind for the growth of what it is that we are all doing is, are those companies outliers or are they part of this prosperity trend? And are we going to see more adoption? And maybe the answer to that question is the branding question, but it dawned on me that we didn't hear it and we are hearing it. So, and then the last question, and I think this is already answered by this panel, because I heard Harambe referenced by all of the skillers in the room, which is incredible. We heard yesterday from Carrie Hallard, the CEO of GSA, and also the convener of this coalition of associations of GT and BSC. Sorry, I have a terrible time with that acronym. But in some ways, I'm wondering about co-opetition and how impact sourcing as a concept gets furthered through more collaboration and within all the competition, because no doubt it is the right thing to do as much as it is the great thing to do. And those are the questions and comments I'm going to leave you with. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to continuing these conversations.
Well, great. Thank you, Rita. And thank you very much to your team for sharing their insights, to Sharmi and Shaun, to Franco, David and Clayton. Some great questions that you've left us with, which we will take forward, I think, as will hopefully the audience. And I think what did come out of that conversation in terms of real highlights was this notion we heard, or the evidence we heard from David of, the role of the heart, how CX and HX converge in business today. We also heard from Shaun's example of the work that's been done in the UK, how young unemployed workers with no prior experience can move into more complex roles and really, reap the rewards of that opportunity with the kind of incomes that are out there because of the demand for these skills. And it was also really interesting to see, as you talk about the branding, how things have shifted. And Clayton talked about impact employment as opposed to impact in sourcing specifically, and in some cases it wasn't mentioned. But what we all seemingly agreed on is that it's about reaching the marginalized communities, and in our world, the excluded youth, and giving them that access to a work opportunity where they'll excel. And the results of those retention figures of 80% plus over 12 months, makes the case economically why this is a strategic imperative and not a nice to have. And so thank you very much indeed. And we really appreciate your input and all your colleagues for their time, insights and expertise. Thank you.